Hello. Welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 58, Copying and Plagiarism. And this is the Happy New Year edition already in some parts of the world. Uh, the new year has sprung upon us. America is waiting for its kind of first glimpses of the new year. Hopefully, it's going to be promising. In the process of that, I find myself between two interesting things. I mean, over here, I hear on WQXR in that classical countdown, I have Dvorak's Symphony Number 9, New World Symphony, right? And I come across a piece that I've read many times regarding Borges. Uh, Again, my one of my favorite little books. And this is In Memoriam, JFK. When I was born in 1959 in April 13th, 13 April 1959, I was only a little boy when JFK was murdered. But I remember this as a kind of like resounding kind of premonition. It kind of has taken me most of my life, and I still don't understand why this had to happen. But I'll read this very short piece. I'll read a part of it and I'll read more of it. But I think it's important to kind of understand that it's the dynamic between personalities and circumstance that bring about these things. One of the things I've said that kind of plagues our time is the fact that society in its highest times has kept the rabble at bay, and so it's kind of allowed genius to benefit from the peace and contemplative nature in order to kind of manifest itself. But when genius is besieged by mediocrity, the rabble, the mob, it basically starts to kind of like create circumstances like this. And I see ourselves as we go into the new year in this kind of circumstance. In earlier times, the bullet had been other things because Pythagorean circumstance is not reserved for humankind alone. It was the silken cord given to viziers in the East, the rifles and bayonets that cut down the defenders of the Alamo, the triangular blade that slit a queen's throat, the wood of a cross, and the dark nails that pierced the flesh of the Redeemer. The poison kept by the Carthaginian chief in an iron ring on his finger, the serene goblet that Socrates drank down one evening. In the dawn of time, it was the stone that Cain hurled at Abel, and in the future it shall be many things that we cannot even imagine today, but that will be able to put an end to men and their wondrous, fragile life. Be wary, my friends. This is what we wrought upon ourselves. Cultivate, manifest, support, revel in genius, in beauty, in truth, and love. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Okay, so episode 58, Copying and Plagiarism. The notes of Dvorak kind of will sit in the background as we kind of hearkened the potential of that wondrous manifestation of the new world. Now it's a trepidous path to make sure that that fragile light doesn't get extinguished. So, what is the plight of genius in the year ahead and the year beyond that? Okay, a ponderous but necessary note, I believe, given the circumstance. So, we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about what we've talked about before in terms of copying, but also list something that is close and somewhat nuanced, but I think necessary to distinguish in relationship to copying, and that is plagiarism. Julie, do you want to kind of start us off with what you think and give us an idea of what we're going to be talking about more in the new year on this topic?
Well, yes. Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
There are myriad, vast differences between those who copy and knowingly copy in order to learn, in order to be inspired, in order to hone their skills, in order to define and perpetuate their crafts. In fact, a country where copying is held in very high regard is Japan, where skills are passed down generationally over hundreds and hundreds of years, and the acolyte will copy the work of the master
Technique.
to learn their technique and to actually learn their craft, their secrets, their ways of doing things, very, very time honored ways, but obviously ways that worked extremely well. They are not claiming other people's work. See, claiming other people's work as your own is plagiarizing. Not having any original ideas and stealing those those ideas of people who are capable of original and inventive and singular thought, that is plagiarism. And I think it is the lowest form of existence, where one masquerades as an original thinker. I mean, a plagiarist is committing the worst crime, which is masquerade of originality. They are not capable of producing or creating anything. Therefore, they steal the work of those who are and brand it as their own, which is absolutely not. And the thing about a plagiarist is they cannot make work, not once, not more, not thrice. So they will always have to go and steal more work and steal ideas because they're incapable. They're not smart enough. They're not imaginative enough to actually come up with ideas of their own. So you asked me to,
I think it's interesting because I think one of the things that, and this is maybe a subtle thing to understand, is that as certain things kind of fall away, and we've talked about this, and again, we've referred to Borges, in relation to this is the idea of kind of like what is lost with any individual circumstance. And we've talked about the idea of the loss of certain things that kind of have merit, but as they fall away, they become degraded and they become lost. We've talked about the idea of the unbreakable bond and how certain things are uncoupled, and it's to the benefit or the detriment depending on what comes after that. So give a quick overview of my principle that I kind of see here. And then we'll kind of wait for what we see, and we'll talk more in depth. I mean, there's so many things to talk about. There's talk about, like you brought up, the idea of copying of technique, the idea of AI. For me, the difference is I always thought, we've talked before about the kind of like drawing and copying, and I think there's a kinship, right, between the copyist and the draftsman. But I don't see a kinship between, say, the draftsman and the copyist and the plagiarist, because I think the plagiarist violates a primary fundamental principle. And I think it's a principle that we see violated more and more, and is becoming more and more accepted. And with the birth of AI, it's becoming the norm. And that is the idea of claiming original work, which is not original work. The copyist does not claim to make original work. The draftsman makes original work from something that may have been that from which it sprang. There's a kind of like a family tree of the origination of the original work of the draftsman. The copyist also is dependent on that which he acknowledges is that which he is studying. And as Julie said, the copying of technique is the way in which it's time honored. Yeah, exactly.
That's something totally different.
I found that for the most part, in the case of weak teachers, which I had many of, the idea of kind of saying, we want you to study this, we want to study that within this particular idiom, was always very difficult to me. The only time that ever made sense to me was when I looked at and copied the work of Leonardo, because for that case, Leonardo, like Mozart, leaves a lot to you to kind of have the freedom to interpret the technique yourself.
If I may, you were trying to understand how Leonardo did what he did, thought what he thought.
Yes.
So you were copying Leonardo's drawings in order to understand his thought processes.
To me, it was a way in which it was a way in which not to become Leonardo, but to kind of understand the man. And I think that that's the kind of thing. And I think when people are less genius, than Leonardo, it kind of becomes more
That's
difficult.
everybody else.
Exactly. So, what are they? The plagiarist is a fraud. Simply said, he is simply trying to take the credit for an original idea which is not his own. The copyist, like I said, is dependent on that which he is studying, right? But the plagiarist is not studying anything. He's simply trying to kind of pastiche together a sense of identity from something that has no connection to him whatsoever.
A key point here. The dedicated copyist is an incredibly hard and a diligent worker in most of the cases. A plagiarist is lazy, fundamentally lazy at their core. And I want to make this as a distinction that's incredibly important. People who are intellectually lazy, who are slack and lacking in creativity, void of any imagination, those are the incredibly negative human traits that give birth to plagiarists. That's what I think. A copyist, I mean, let's say a lacquer artisan in Japan who is learning how to work with the incredibly toxic rusciol from the sap of the lacquer tree, work it into a paste, apply 30, 40 layers of lacquer, sanding each down, polishing it, inlaying it with, mother of pearl, sprinkling, gold maquille on it. They are far from lazy. They're incredibly hard workers.
Agreed.
And incredibly diligent, almost to obsession in a lot of instances.
Agreed.
The antithesis, I'll bring up a third type of person.
Oh, okay.
The imitator.
Oh, nice. Got to read that.
Yes.
Okay. That, I already see. I mean, we're into 12 minutes. I want to talk for another 5. Julie wants to talk to another 5. We don't want to do that because the thing is, we want to have something. Well, actually, there's so much we're going to talk about.
For 5.
No, I get it. But the thing
terrible.
is, no, it's not. But I'm saying, we were starting to do these things for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think the previews have been really successful. Yeah. And I think the previews, we have to kind of spend a little bit, we have to think about it, because what's interesting is, I think when we do this, we're starting to see more views on the actual piece. I want to thank our fans. We hit a new high.
Yeah, we did.
For our last piece, which was drawing as generator process. We actually topped 50 views.
Which is
40
really
views,
great.
40 views, which is
and still going.
Which is higher than we've ever
41.
had,
Yeah.
and by a lot, which is kind of interesting.
And 63 shares.
Really?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No, it's true.
Okay. Anyway, so and in fact, I see numbers. I mean, again, when I first started doing these things, there was no one around, and probably because that I brought Julie in, and now people are watching.
Thank you.
But anyway, I think that
I come
that
with
idea,
the grand ideas.
To follow up on what you're saying,
yes.
Think about this: intellectual integrity, desire to understand, pulls you headlong into your work. So you don't have to worry about kind of that passion, that desire. You can't think of anything else. You're drawn into it. You're pulled into it. Without that, and I think that's what the real artist senses in the plagiarist, is there's no real integrity. There's no real desire. There's no attempt to understand.
Incredibly lazy.
Exactly, because there's no drive. I mean, as Ortega says, the mass man is a person who feels no interest in anything. He sees no need to kind of cultivate himself or anything around him. So as a result, there's no passion, there's no fire. The one thing that to me is the most loathsome, pathetic, pitiful thing is the individual who doesn't have the sense to be able to admit, I really don't want to do this. But I realize I can cheat people and it's easy.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. A key thing about the imitator is they have several very low human qualities, and I use that word in a very loose fashion, which are not shared by the other two,
Mm.
even through the looking glass, are
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
shared. If you know what I mean,
Mhm.
meaning it doesn't stand as the dark side of a positive opposite.
Mhm.
The imitator, and this goes right to artificial intelligence, is an imitation of life. It is not a copyist, it's not a plagiarist, but there are humans using artificial intelligence to plagiarize, and
Mm.
that is something
Yeah,
else.
interesting.
These are qualities. One is avarice and one is bitterness.
Envy
So yes,
too. Yeah,
absolutely,
envy.
you're right. So avarice, envy, bitterness, this is a triumvirate of vices that I believe the 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 imitator, unfortunately, they show they possess in spades, which is they are very jealous of those who do achieve, jealous of those who have original ideas,
Mhm.
and they will imitate in a social way, in a professional way, in
Mhm.
order to blend in with groups of their peers who, and this is key, are not actually their peers at all.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly. And
they are
this, I'm going to write
pretenders.
this down as part one. This is
Mhm.
going to be part one because it will be part two, and
Mhm.
it'll be seen in the title. Because I realize we can't. I mean, we're not even talking about what we're going to talk about. We've already kind of like gone almost to 20
It's a
minutes.
vast topic.
It is, and I think the things that we're bringing up. One of the things, like I said, is that
Mhm.
as I talk about these things,
Uh-huh.
I ruminate in the talking, and then things come to mind. I was just thinking about that movie Zelig, what Woody
Mm.
Allen made, and I think I have a
Yeah,
kind of interesting, maybe have an interesting take on
I'm
that.
sure
But
you
anyway,
do. Yeah.
so the idea is, you know, uh, I you can't when someone basically tries to take a shortcut to be something of consequence. Uh, it's just something that I find so loathsome. It's pathetic. I loathe people like that. I can't hate them because they're
They're
not they're
pathetic.
like
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
they're pathetic and I pity them.
Yeah.
So you know, you never will glean the consequence and the harvest of your
Mhm.
benefits because you don't care about it. You're looking at something else and you're cheapening the circumstance. Anyway, so that's basically the overview. And again, this was kind of like
Mhm.
as we started talking, this just thing exploded. So again, this will be part one.
How exciting.
Yeah, exactly. So, happy New Year, and I think it started with that idea. Like this is the
Mhm.
kind of way in which we want to kind of look into because coming up in the end of January, it's the anniversary, our 31st anniversary,
Yes, it
and
is.
I'm actually
Yay.
using it as an anniversary of this to talk about the idea of where the realm of ideas is free to all started and what it's become in a very short amount of time without going too much into politics because
Mhm.
politics is not my venue, just how I've had to adjust my thinking in terms of the kind of speculative abstract circumstance that I started with to now being an advocate to defend the position, which I never ever thought would be the case. So, last word.
Uh, yes.
Did I
I.
tell you how great you are at last words? Because I mean,
You are.
you sum up so well in terms of like the way that you
Wait
kind
till
of.
you hear this
Oh, go
one.
for it, Pete.
I'm going to strike a great, big, sexy metaphor,
Oh, yeah.
which is going to
Okay.
encompass all of these types of artifice
Mm.
and the dedicated copyist, who we cannot lump all together. The masked ball in Venice. Think about it. Everything that went on at the masked ball, including the
Mm.
elaborate masks, the animal masks, the flickering between human states and bestial existence,
Mm.
the artifice, the pretense of station, social station, political station,
Mm.
the very physicality of crafting a persona that just existed for a span of hours and then vanished,
Mm.
never to exist again. but then reared its head in the gossip mill, in the personas, in the written word, in paintings, in drawings. So think about that.
All of that.
That encompasses all of these types.
I thought of something we were talking about before about
Mhm.
like the idea of like intellect and execution. We were talking about the fact that, in fact, I have a great former student of mine who was looked upon as lesser than she was simply because she lacked, a kind of like verbal acuity. She was, but she was capable of consistently of generating brilliant work, which is not coincidence. You
No,
may be able
hardly.
to kind of stumble upon something, but again, you don't stumble upon something consistently.
Not over and over
No,
again. No.
exactly.
Mhm.
Or consistently. That's funny. All right. So
Yes.
the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all, especially now, for us to keep it this way.
Precisely.